Hi everyone, I'm Karen from the Peace Discipline channel where you can learn more about nonviolent discipline. In today's video, we'll be looking at the practice of giving children reasons to get them to cooperate, whether this works, when it can be constructive, and when it could actually make things worse. This video will be relevant to parents, to teachers, and anyone else who works with or cares for children. In my work consulting on nonviolent discipline, I often find that adults believe that giving children reasons why they need to cooperate is a good approach in discipline. But does this actually work? Let's look at what the research says about giving reasons and also at some real examples. What does the research say about using reasons as a discipline tool? The answer is almost nothing. The very little that we came across when we did the systematic overview on nonviolent discipline options did not suggest that giving children reasons why they should or shouldn't do something is effective as a means to get them to cooperate or to stop challenging behavior. But it did show that adults like to give them. Adults love to give reasons. But it seems this approach is more popular than effective. This leaves us with questions like, if reasons are not usually effective to deal with challenging behavior or get cooperation, when would it be constructive to give a reason? And are there situations where giving reasons could actually make things worse? Let's look at an example. You need to stop playing that game now. Why? Because you need to go to bed. No, I don't. Yes, you do. Why? Because you're tired. I'm not tired. Yes, you are. No, I'm not. You need your sleep. Sleep is good for you. I don't need to sleep. Yes, you do. If you don't get enough sleep, you'll be tired in the morning. I won't feel tired. Yes, you will. Remember how tired you felt this morning because you went to bed late last night? I didn't feel tired. I was fine. You were not fine. You were very grumpy. I wasn't. Yes, you were. Remember how grumpy you were with your brother? Here we can see how the parent keeps trying to get the child to cooperate by giving reasons, and it's not going well. Sometimes it's easier to see why something won't work if we think of a scenario with lots of children. At one stage, I had a job looking after 3 to 6-year-olds at an aftercare. Part of the afternoon program was for them to take a nap. Now, if you've ever looked after small children, you will know that taking a nap is not always very high on their priority list, and they often resist doing it. Now, imagine I went outside where children are playing happily on the jungle gym and on the swings and in the sand pit and try to use reasons to get them to come in and take a nap. Guys, you look tired. Don't you think it would be a good idea to come in and take a nap? You'll feel so much better if you get some sleep. I don't think there'd be any takers, not even one. To get the children to take a nap, I used structure in the form of a routine. They knew that there would be a nap time at a certain point of the afternoon. It wasn't a choice, it was just part of the program. We also had rituals they enjoyed, such as me calling them in from outside by playing a little tune on the recorder, lighting a candle, and reading a story while they lay down and relaxed. Nap time happened every day, and it worked because they expected it, not because I persuaded them that it's a good idea. Here's the thing. You don't want to be in the position where you have to persuade your child every time you want them to do something, hoping they'll agree with you and therefore cooperate. What if they don't agree? In fact, the chance that they won't agree is really high. They're a child. They have a completely different perspective. They have their own mind and their own way of seeing things. It's highly likely that they'll disagree with your reasons. And so if you put yourself in a position where they have to agree with you in order to cooperate, you're in for a very difficult time. Abraham Maslow once said, when the only tool one has is a hammer, one tends to treat everything as if it's a nail. Adults sometimes do this with giving reasons. When they sense that the child does not agree, instead of realizing that they're taking the wrong route by trying to persuade the child, they hammer away harder, explaining even more, giving even more reasons, trying to sell the child the thing they want them to do. That's it really. They launch into a sales pitch on good behavior. Now, if you're wondering why this is not a good idea, Just think about how you feel when you get one of those sales calls, or when someone tries to persuade you to change your views on something or to do something that you don't want to do. It's annoying, right? Children hate this just as much as adults do, and so they're likely to switch off and tune you out, or to become more resistant. Let's say the child has to tie their hair up for school, and mom's trying to persuade them to do this, but they prefer to wear their hair some other way. She's standing behind them at the mirror saying, "You see, look how nice your hair looks when we tie it back. We can see your whole face and you look so much better." The child is not impressed. "I don't like my hair tied up." "Oh, but you should. It looks so lovely." Mom is doing a sales pitch on the behavior she wants, which is for her child to tie up their hair. Instead of acknowledging that her child doesn't like tying up their hair, she's trying to sell them the idea, trying to sell them her way of seeing things. Not only is this annoying, but it's not very respectful towards the child. The child has their own way of seeing things, and they're entitled to that. They have their own likes and their own dislikes and their own preferences and opinions, and that's the way it should be. We cannot and should not try to control these, especially around something as personal as their style and how they like to wear their hair. They may have to tie it up for school, but they don't have to like it. What this mother could do differently here is to acknowledge her child's feelings. She could talk to them about how they like to wear their hair and affirm that they have their own style. She can insist that the child abides by the school rules, but still give plenty of room for self-expression outside of that. She could also help the child express their individuality within the school rules. Something like, "I know art styles are really not your thing, but which one should we try today? Which would be the least bad?" In this scenario, even though the child does not like the school hair rule, at least they'll feel that their mom hears them on that and understands. A father once shared in a workshop how he and his stepson argued nearly every day. One day, Dad took a different approach. Instead of trying to persuade his stepson and get him to agree with him, he started saying things like, "I know you may disagree, but," or "I know you'll have your own thoughts on this, but." Overnight, they stopped fighting as much. You see, what this boy actually needed was not to be persuaded, but to have the room to disagree, the space to see things his own way, to be allowed to have his own mind. Once his stepdad gave him the space to disagree, he was much more cooperative, even if he didn't like the plan. I also find this with children. They need their views to be respected, not overridden with persuasion. Now let's go back to that example where the parent is giving reasons to try to get the child to go to bed. I'm sure we've all experienced situations where we ask a child to do something and then they ask, "Why?" Not like they're interested in a reason, but "why?" or "why?" like they're challenging you. Before we get trapped into answering at a moment like that, we should stop and assess something. Does the child really want a reason? Or, as we saw in that example, do they simply want you to give your reasons so that they can shoot them down and then feel justified in not cooperating? In a case like this, giving reasons could actually feed a power struggle. As I've said in previous videos, a discipline option is not good or bad in itself. Rather, it's good if it fits with the child's needs and signals at the time you use it. When your responses fit well with the child's needs and signals, we call that attunement. And in the peace discipline approach, attunement is the key to good discipline and not the use of any particular discipline skill. So before you give a reason, use your attunement. Why did the child ask for a reason? Did they really want one? Or did they want to get you to give your reasons so they could argue with you and shoot down your reasons? If they really want a reason, then you can give them one. Let's say it's not bedtime at the moment, you're driving in the car, and your child seems to be thinking about something, and then they suddenly say, "Mommy, why do we have to go to bed early every night?" In this case, the timing of their question and their tone of voice suggests that they're just trying to figure things out, and it would be fine to give a reason. In fact, to deny a child a reason when they really want one is completely unnecessary and very frustrating for the child. So give them a reason, or what might be even better, ask them if they know the reason. Say something like, "Why do you think?" we have to go to bed early. So we can get more sleep? This would give the parent a chance to affirm the child for their answer and perhaps to encourage them to think further. Something like, that's right. And why do you think we need to get more sleep? Because sleep is good for people? That's right. Sleep is very important. At this point, the parent needs to keep attuning to the child. Is this enough of an answer? Or does the child need more? If the child asks nothing further, the parent can leave it at that. Because taking one question that a child asks as an excuse to give a long lecture on the virtues of getting to sleep early is not very attuned. It's more likely to get the child to switch off and wish they hadn't asked you. But if the child asks a further question like, but why is sleep good for us? Then it would be okay to give more reasons. So the answer to the question, when is it constructive to give a reason, is simple. Give reasons when the child asks for them or seems to be interested in them. Now let's look at the other scenario. What if the child is not asking for a reason in that way? What if they're asking you in that challenging way? Like, why? Why? Again, the key is attunement. The situation and the child's tone of voice suggest that they're not looking for a reason to help them understand something. They're looking to resist. They want your reasons so they can challenge them and win and get what they want. So what do you do in that kind of situation? One answer is to give the kind of reason that says, this is not up for discussion. This sort of reason is not an explanation, but a statement showing that no other option is being offered and no further explanation is needed. This kind of answer is a way of being firm. Here are two examples of adults using this kind of answer. I heard from a teacher that he worked out a seating plan for his grade 9 students. He knew from experience that seating children so that talkative friends were not sitting together and that those that needed more attention or might get distracted were closer to the front really helped his classroom discipline. But when he announced the seating plan, some students were unhappy about it. They enjoyed sitting with their friends at the back of the class and did not appreciate the changes. One student started challenging the teacher to give reasons. Why do I have to sit at the front? Why? The teacher answered in a firm voice, because I'm your teacher and I'm asking you to. The boy sat down in his new desk and accepted the situation. The other students followed suit. What is interesting here is that the teacher actually did have a number of reasons why he laid out the class in this way, but he held back on giving those reasons because of his attunement to the students. He could see that they were resisting rather than genuinely looking for reasons. And so he answered them in a way that reminded them that he was in charge of deciding who sits where. Here's another example. A single mom was hosting a sleepover party for her son's 14th birthday. His friends had all arrived, and she noticed that he was showing his new girlfriend where she could sleep, in his room. Mom did not feel comfortable with this, and so she said, no, she can't sleep there. The girls are sleeping in the other room. Why? He asked, and his friends also looked to see what she would say. Mom was on the spot. Now imagine she started giving reasons at this point. Imagine she said, well, at a certain age, a boy and a girl. She knew that whatever reason she gave, he would have said she doesn't need to worry. They wouldn't do that. But Mom knew better than to give reasons at that point. So when he said, why? She answered with, because that's my rule. She noticed that the friends immediately responded to this. They understood that moms had rules. Their moms had rules too. Her son calmed down and carried his girlfriend's things to the other room. In both of these examples, in the classroom and in this home, we can see that the adults correctly assess that the child is resisting them rather than genuinely looking for reasons. And in both cases, they give an attuned response. An attuned response is a response that fits well with the child's needs and signals. In these cases, those signals showed that the children needed the adults to be firm rather than engaging in a debate. So if a child is asking for reasons in order to challenge you, don't fuel a power struggle by giving your reasons when they just want to shoot them down. Rather, give an answer that says, this is not up for discussion. Here are some more examples of that kind of answer. Because in our house, we don't have screen time during the week. Because it's Sunday and on Sundays we wash hair. Because I'm the mom and it's my job to say when bedtime is. It's quite possible to convey that something is not up for discussion, while at the same time acknowledging that the child may disagree, and that's okay. If you want to do this, you might add something like, one day when you have your own house, you might have a different rule. Or, I wonder what you'll decide one day when it's your job to decide when bedtime is. If you like, you can tell me while we get ready for bed. So in answer to the question asked at the beginning of this video, does it help to give reasons? Giving reasons is not usually effective in getting children to cooperate. There's nothing wrong with giving a reason, but there are times when it's counterproductive, such as when your child is asking for them in order to shoot them down. The key is attunement. Does the child want a reason? Would they feel helped by a reason? Or are you just doing a sales pitch to try to persuade them? If you're hammering away with reasons and explanations and a sales pitch on good behavior, then you're probably just annoying the child and increasing their resistance. If a child genuinely seems to want a reason, then give them one. When a child really wants to understand something better and the parent says, because I said so, that's really frustrating for them. You can see from what I'm saying that it's not wrong to give a reason or to say, because I'm asking you to. These things are not good or bad in themselves. The question is whether your response fits well with the child's needs and signals. So if I were to sum up my advice on giving reasons, don't expect reasons to do the job of getting your child to cooperate or stopping problem behavior. You're going to need to rely on other nonviolent discipline options to deal with challenging behavior and get children to cooperate. If your child asks sincerely for a reason, then give them one, but don't fall into the trap of giving your reasons if the child just wants to shoot them down. Don't overload them with reasons that they're not asking for, and especially don't get into a sales pitch on good behavior. Nobody likes that. So let's work on attuning to each child, reading their signals, and responding in a way that fits with their needs. Because attunement to your child, rather than any particular discipline tool, is the key to good discipline. That's all for now. I'll be back soon with more on nonviolent discipline. Press like if you found this video helpful and don't forget to subscribe. If you would like more information on nonviolent discipline, you can visit the Peace Discipline website, where you will find a free nonviolent discipline toolkit and also published research on discipline options. Resources such as the toolkit and these videos are free to promote safer environments for children, so please share them with others who would find them helpful. Thanks for watching.